Clara Simmons knew exactly what her husband had traded her for the moment. She saw Amelia Watson's porcelain skin and delicate hands that had never known a day of hard work. Standing in the dusty main street of Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, 1882, Clara clutched the divorce papers with white knuckles as the truth crashed over her like a summer storm. "Miss Simmons," the clerk from the land office approached hesitantly, "your husband left this for you as well." He handed her an envelope containing the deed to their small homestead and a note with just 5 words. "The house is yours. Goodbye." Clara stood motionless as townsfolk whispered behind raised hands. 3 years of marriage dissolved like sugar in hot coffee, leaving nothing but the bitter grounds of reality. At 24, she was alone in a town where a woman without a husband might as well be invisible. "Reckon that'll teach him," came a deep voice from behind her. Clara turned, ready to unleash the fury building inside her, only to find herself staring up at a stranger. He was tall and lean, his face weathered by sun and wind, eyes the color of the Arizona sky after rain. A worn Stetson cast shadows across features that seemed carved from the surrounding landscape. "Excuse me," she managed, trying to keep her voice steady. "Thomas Simmons," the stranger said, nodding toward the retreating figure of her husband who was helping Amelia into a carriage bound for Phoenix. "Man just gave up gold for dust." Clara's eyes narrowed. "I don't believe we've been introduced, Mr. Cain." He touched the brim of his hat. "Kieran Kane, just passing through." His eyes, kind but assessing, took in her threadbare dress and the homestead deed clutched in her hand. "Seems you might be in need of some assistance, madam." "I need no man's help," Clara responded sharply, tucking the papers into her pocket. "Especially not a stranger's." Kieran Kane's mouth twitched with something that might have been respect. "Fair enough, but if you change your mind, I'll be at Wilson's for a few days." Clara watched him walk away, his spurs jingling softly with each step. She straightened her shoulders and headed toward her home, now fighting back tears that threatened to spill over. She would not cry in public. She would not give the gossips that satisfaction. The half-mile walk to the small homestead gave Clara time to consider her situation. The property consisted of a modest cabin, a small barn, and 20 acres of land that had proven difficult to cultivate. Thomas had been talking about selling for months, frustrated by the hard soil and scarce water. Now she understood his eagerness. He needed money to start his new life with Amelia. As Clara approached the cabin, she noticed fresh hoofprints in the dirt. The door stood slightly ajar. Heart racing, she grabbed a pitchfork from outside the barn and cautiously pushed the door open. Inside, drawers had been pulled out, her few possessions scattered across the floor. The lockbox where they kept their savings was open and empty. Clara dropped the pitchfork and fell to her knees, surveying the chaos. Thomas had taken everything of value, including the $60 they'd saved for winter supplies. "Damn you, Thomas," she whispered, tears finally breaking free. "Damn you to hell." Clara spent the night sorting through what remained of her life. By morning, she had made her decision. She would not sell the homestead as Thomas clearly expected her to do. This was her land now, and she would make it thrive or die trying. But first, she needed money for supplies and seed. There was only one option: she would have to find work in town. The next morning, Clara dressed in her best skirt and shirtwaist, pinned her honey-brown hair into a neat bun, and walked into Copper Creek. The town was stirring to life as shopkeepers unlocked doors and wagons delivered goods to the general store. After being rejected by the seamstress, who had no need for extra hands, and the hotel, which couldn't possibly employ a divorced woman, Clara stood on the boardwalk, fighting despair. Her final hope was the silver dollar, the town's respectable saloon. While serving drinks wasn't her first choice, it might be her only option. As she approached the saloon, Clara nearly collided with Kieran Kane exiting Wilson's boarding house next door. "Miss Simmons," he said, steadying her by the elbows. "Heading somewhere with purpose, I see." Clara disengaged herself from his grip. "Mr. Cain, yes, I'm seeking employment." His eyes took in her carefully mended clothes and determined expression. "At the Silver Dollar." "It's not your concern where I work," she replied stiffly. "No, it's not," he agreed. "But before you go in there, you might want to know that Philip Davis is hiring a schoolteacher. Town's growing fast enough to need one." Clara's heart leapt. Before marrying Thomas, she had worked as a teacher's assistant back in Ohio. "Where would I find Mr. Davis?" "Town council office, end of the street. Tell him Cain sent you." He tipped his hat and continued on his way. Clara hesitated, then changed direction. 20 minutes later, she exited the town council office with a position as Copper Creek schoolteacher. The pay was modest, but it would be enough to buy supplies and keep her going until she could make the land productive. Over the next few weeks, Clara settled into a routine. Mornings and afternoons were spent teaching the town's dozen school-age children in a small building behind the church. Evenings and weekends, she worked on the homestead, clearing rocks from the soil and planning what crops might grow in the unyielding ground. She saw Kieran Kane occasionally in town. He seemed to have found work with the Barton Ranch outside town, as she sometimes spotted him helping drive cattle or delivering supplies. He always tipped his hat politely but never intruded on her privacy, which Clara appreciated. Her pride was still too raw, her humiliation too fresh to welcome attention from any man. One Saturday in late September, Clara was struggling to repair her cabin's leaking roof when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. Kieran Kane rode toward the homestead, leading a pack horse loaded with lumber. "Afternoon, Miss Simmons," he called, dismounting with easy grace. "Thought you might need some help with that roof before the autumn rains." Clara climbed down from her precarious perch on an upturned barrel. "Mr. Cain, while I appreciate the gesture, I didn't ask for assistance." "No, you didn't." He began unloading the lumber. "Consider it neighborly concern. That patch won't hold through one good storm." "I can't pay you," she said flatly. "Didn't ask for payment." He glanced at the roof. "But I won't say no to some water. Been a long ride." Clara hesitated, then nodded curtly. "I'll get you some." Inside the cabin, she leaned against the door, fighting conflicting emotions. His help would save her days of work and materials she couldn't afford. But accepting felt like admitting weakness. When she returned with water, Kieran had already set up a ladder and was examining the roof damage. "Worse than it looks from the ground," he commented, taking the offered cup. "Might need to replace more than just those few shingles." "Do what you think best," Clara said, surprised by her own acquiescence. For the next few hours, Clara worked alongside Kieran, handing up tools and materials as he repaired the roof. The physical labor was a welcome distraction from her thoughts, and she found herself relaxing slightly in his undemanding presence. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked as they took a break in the shade of the single cottonwood tree behind the cabin. Kieran considered before answering. "My sister was left by her husband 3 years back. Had 3 young ones to raise alone," he shrugged. "Guess I know how hard it can be starting over." "And where is your sister now?" "Colorado. Remarried to a good man who treats her children like his own." He smiled slightly. "Sometimes things work out better the second time around." Clara looked away. "I'm not interested in a second time, Mr. Cain. Didn't suggest you were." He stood and dusted off his pants. "Let's finish that roof before sundown." By evening, the roof was repaired, and Kieran had even fixed the sagging front porch steps. As he prepared to leave, Clara impulsively invited him to stay for supper, a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. They ate at her small table, conversation surprisingly easy between them. Kieran spoke of his years working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, of the 2 years he'd spent mining in Colorado, and his recent decision to settle somewhere permanently. "Why Copper Creek?" Clara asked, pouring more coffee. "Honest work, fair pay at the Barton place. Town's growing. Feels like a good place to put down roots." He studied her across the table. "What about you? You planning to stay and work this land?" Clara nodded firmly. "It's mine now. I intend to make it succeed." "It's hard land," he observed, not unkindly. "Rocky soil, water scarce." "I'm aware of the challenges, Mr. Cain." "Kieran," he corrected gently. "Kieran," she conceded, "but I'm not afraid of hard work." "Never thought you were." He stood to leave. "I could come by next weekend, help clear some of those rocks from the south field. Might be good for vegetables come spring." Clara walked him to the door, conflicted. His help would be invaluable, but she was wary of creating obligations she couldn't repay. "Why would you do that?" Kieran looked down at her, his expression open and honest. "Because sometimes folks need help, Miss Simmons, no strings attached." After a moment, Clara nodded. "Thank you, and please call me Clara." His smile transformed his weathered face. "Good night, Clara. I'll see you next week." True to his word, Kieran returned the following Saturday. Together, they cleared rocks from the small field Clara hoped to plant in the spring. The work was backbreaking, but with 2 people, they made significant progress. This pattern continued through October, Kieran appearing on Saturdays to help with whatever task Clara was tackling that week. They repaired fences, cleaned out the small barn, and dug a second water catchment basin for the rare but precious rainfall. During these workdays, Clara found herself slowly relaxing in Kieran's company. He was unfailingly respectful, never presuming or pushing for more than the cautious friendship she offered. He made her laugh with stories of his travels and listened attentively when she spoke of her childhood in Ohio and her dreams for the homestead. As November approached, the nights grew colder. Clara's teaching salary covered her basic needs, but the coming winter worried her. The homestead was isolated, and she had no close neighbors to call on if trouble arose. One crisp Saturday, Kieran arrived with his usual tools and an unexpected addition, a young milk cow tethered behind his horse. "What's this?" Clara asked, eyeing the gentle-faced Jersey. "Name's Daisy," Kieran said, leading the cow toward the barn. "Barton's selling off some stock before winter." "Thought you might use her," Clara followed, torn between gratitude and pride. "I can't accept such a gift, Kieran. Not a gift." He secured the cow in the barn. "It's an investment. You'll have milk through winter, maybe a calf in spring. Pay me back when you can." Clara knew the cow represented security she desperately needed. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll repay you. No rush." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than usual. "Clara, there's something else. There's a storm coming. Bad one, according to old-timers. Might want to consider staying in town until it passes." "I'll be fine here," she insisted. "The roof is solid now, thanks to you, and I have supplies." Kieran looked unconvinced but didn't argue. Instead, he helped her stock firewood near the door and showed her how to fashion emergency lamps from rendered fat in case her oil ran out. As dusk approached and Kieran prepared to leave, heavy clouds gathered on the horizon. "Storm's coming faster than I thought," he observed, frowning at the sky. "I should stay, help you secure everything." "That's not necessary," Clara said quickly, though anxiety fluttered in her chest. "Clara." His voice was serious. "This isn't about propriety. Mountain storms can be dangerous. At least let me help you prepare, then I'll go." Reluctantly, she agreed. Together they worked quickly as darkness fell, securing loose items and reinforcing the barn door. By the time they finished, the wind had risen to a howl, and the first heavy raindrops pelted the newly repaired roof. "You can't ride back to town in this," Clara said, shouting to be heard above the wind. "It's too dangerous." Kieran looked torn between concern for her reputation and practical safety. "I'll sleep in the barn," he finally said. "Don't be ridiculous." Clara gestured to the intensifying storm. "You'll freeze. The cabin has enough room." Inside, Clara busied herself preparing a simple meal while Kieran built up the fire. The small cabin grew warm and bright, a haven against the raging storm outside. After they ate, an awkward silence fell between them. "I'll make a pallet by the fire," Kieran said finally. Clara nodded, relieved by his understanding. She retreated behind the curtain that separated her sleeping area from the main room and changed into her nightgown and robe. When she emerged to fetch water, she found Kieran arranging his bedroll on the floor. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for respecting my boundaries." He looked up, his expression serious. "Your trust means something to me, Clara. I wouldn't risk it." The simple honesty in his words touched her deeply. For the first time since Thomas's betrayal, Clara felt the protective wall around her heart crack slightly. They talked late into the night, the storm providing a strangely intimate backdrop to their conversation. Clara found herself sharing things she'd told no one: her disappointment in her failed marriage, her fear of failing at the homestead, her determination to prove her worth. "Thomas always said I was too stubborn, too independent," she admitted. "Maybe he was right." "Or maybe he couldn't appreciate a woman with her own mind," Kieran countered. "Some men are threatened by strength in a woman. And you're not." The question slipped out before she could stop it. Kieran's eyes met hers across the firelit room. "No, Clara, I find it admirable." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of deeper feelings neither was ready to acknowledge. The storm raged for 2 days, forcing Kieran to remain at the homestead. They maintained proper decorum, but their conversations grew increasingly personal. Clara learned about Kieran's childhood in Missouri, his father's death when he was 14, and his years working to support his mother and sisters. He spoke of his dream to own land someday, to build something lasting. When the storm finally cleared, Clara was surprised by her reluctance to see him leave. Standing in the doorway as he prepared his horse, she struggled to find the right words. "Kieran, I thank you for everything," he turned, his expression open and warm. "I'll check on you next Saturday, if that's all right." "I'd like that," she admitted. As winter settled over Copper Creek, Kieran's Saturday visits became the highlight of Clara's week. He continued helping with repairs and preparations for spring planting. But more importantly, he brought companionship that eased her loneliness. December brought news that Thomas and Amelia had settled in Phoenix, where Thomas had found work with a banking company. Clara was surprised to discover the information caused her more relief than pain. She was building a new life, one that increasingly included Kieran Kane. The town's Christmas celebration provided the first public acknowledgement of their growing closeness. When Kieran escorted Clara to the dance held in the town hall, whispers followed them across the room. Clara held her head high, ignoring the curious stares. "People are talking," she murmured as Kieran led her into a waltz. "Let them," he replied, his hand warm and steady at her waist. Nothing improper about two friends enjoying a dance. But they were more than friends now, and both knew it. The question of what came next hung unspoken between them. As they danced, Clara caught sight of Philip Davis watching them with a thoughtful expression. The following day, the town council chairman stopped by the schoolhouse after classes. Miss Simmons, the council is very pleased with your work, he began. However, there's been some concern about your association with Mr. Cain. Clara stiffened. My personal friendships are not the council's concern, Mr. Davis. Under normal circumstances, I would agree, but as our school teacher, your reputation affects the school's standing. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. We're not questioning your character, understand. Cain is well respected. But without proper formalization of your relationship, continued employment might become difficult. The implication was clear: marry Kieran or risk her position. The unfairness burned in Clara's throat. Are you threatening my livelihood because I occasionally accept help from a male friend? She asked quietly. Davis had the grace to look embarrassed. Not threatening, Miss Simmons, simply explaining the reality. Parents expect certain standards from their children's teacher. Thank you for your candor, Clara said stiffly. Is that all? When Davis left, Clara sat at her desk, anger and frustration warring within her. She would not be forced into marriage, not even to Kieran, by small-town gossip and outdated conventions. When Kieran arrived that Saturday, Clara told him about Davis's visit. To her surprise, Kieran laughed. Old busybody, he said, shaking his head. Though I suppose I haven't been particularly subtle about my feelings. Clara's heart stuttered. Your feelings? Kieran's expression softened as he looked at her. Clara, I think you know I care for you more than as a friend. But I would never want you to feel pressured or rushed, especially after what happened with Thomas. I care for you too, she admitted quietly, but I won't marry to satisfy the town council's sense of propriety. I wouldn't want you to. He took her hand gently. When if you ever consider marrying again, it should be because it's what you want, not what others expect. His understanding melted something frozen inside her. Impulsively, Clara leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Thank you. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Kieran stepped back slightly, respecting the boundaries she still needed. Now, about that chicken coop you wanted to build. January brought heavy snow and increased isolation for Clara. Kieran's visits became more necessary than ever, bringing supplies and news from town. During one particularly harsh blizzard, he again stayed at the homestead, this time for 3 days. On the third evening, as they sat before the fire, Clara found herself studying Kieran's profile. His presence had become so natural, so right, that she could scarcely remember her life before him. Kieran, she said suddenly, what do you want from life? Truly, he considered the question carefully. Land of my own. A home, family someday. His eyes met hers. Someone to share it with, you. I thought I knew once, she answered honestly. Now I'm less certain. The homestead, yes, independence, but also. She hesitated. Also connection, not losing myself in someone else, but finding a partner who values me as I am. Like Thomas didn't, Kieran observed. No. Thomas wanted a convenient wife, not a partner. She smiled ruefully. He said once that I had too many opinions for a woman. Kieran's laugh was warm. I happen to like your opinions even when they differ from mine. Even when I'm stubborn, she challenged, especially then. His expression grew serious. Clara, I've been meaning to tell you. I've purchased land, the old Murphy property west of town, 50 acres with good water access. Clara felt a curious mixture of happiness and disappointment. You'll be leaving the Barton Ranch then? In spring? He hesitated. It's good land, could support cattle, crops, even has a small orchard. His eyes held hers. It needs work, but the foundations are solid. Something in his tone made Clara's heart race. It sounds perfect for you. Perfect for a family, he corrected quietly. Clara, I'm not asking anything of you now, but I want you to know my intentions. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I would be honored to court you properly. Clara found herself speechless, overwhelmed by emotions she tried to keep at bay. Kieran watched her face, then nodded as if her silence was answer enough. "No pressure," he said gently. "Just something to consider." February brought warmer days and Clara's growing certainty about her feelings for Kieran. They settled into a comfortable routine, with Kieran visiting midweek as well as Saturdays. Together, they began preparing the south field for spring planting, Kieran bringing seeds and tools from town. Clara found herself looking forward to their time together with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. She was falling in love with Kieran Kane, perhaps had already fallen, but the memory of Thomas's betrayal made her cautious. One Wednesday evening in late February, Clara and Kieran were sitting on her porch after a day of work when the sound of an approaching wagon caught their attention. To Clara's shock, Thomas Simmons sat in the driver's seat. Clara stood, her body tense. Beside her, Kieran rose as well, his presence steady and reassuring. Thomas pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down, looking uncomfortable. "Clara," he greeted awkwardly. "I didn't expect company." "Mr. Simmons," she replied coldly. "What brings you back to Copper Creek?" Thomas glanced at Kieran, then back to Clara. "Could we speak privately? Anything you have to say can be said in front of Mr. Cain," Clara insisted. Thomas sighed. "Very well. I've come to discuss the homestead. I'd like to buy it back from you." Clara stared at him in disbelief. "Buy it back? You gave me this land in the divorce." "Yes, well, circumstances have changed." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "The banking position in Phoenix didn't work out as planned. Amelia and I are returning to Copper Creek. And you assumed I'd simply hand over my home." Clara's voice rose with indignation. "I'll pay you fairly," Thomas insisted. "More than it's worth, frankly. This land is barely sustainable, Clara. You must know that by now." "This land is my home," she replied firmly. "It's not for sale." Thomas's expression hardened. "Don't be difficult. You're one woman alone. You can't possibly manage." "She's not alone," Kieran interrupted, his voice calm but steely. "And she's managing just fine." Thomas looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. "I see. Found yourself a protector, Clara." The sneer in his voice was unmistakable. Before Clara could respond, Kieran stepped forward. "Mr. Simmons, I suggest you leave now. Miss Simmons has made her position clear." Thomas hesitated, clearly measuring the cowboy's resolute stance. "This isn't over, Clara," he finally said, climbing back into his wagon. "That land should be mine. I'll be in town if you reconsider." As Thomas drove away, Clara found herself trembling with anger and residual shock. Kieran placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" "Yes." She took a deep breath. "Just surprised. I never thought he'd come back." "Do you think he'll cause trouble?" Kieran asked, concern evident in his voice. "I don't know. Thomas can be persistent when he wants something." Clara sat heavily on the porch step. "Why now, after all this time?" Kieran joined her. "My guess. His grand plans with Miss Amelia didn't pan out. Now he needs a fallback." Clara nodded slowly. "And he assumed I'd be desperate enough to sell." She looked at Kieran, sudden determination flaring. "I won't give up this place, not to him." "Good," Kieran smiled, "because I think you're making something special here." That night, after Kieran left, Clara lay awake thinking about Thomas's return and what it might mean. She wasn't afraid of him exactly, but his presumption that she would simply sell the homestead worried her. Thomas had connections in town that predated their marriage. If he was determined to reclaim the property, he might find ways to pressure her. The following day, Clara's concerns proved warranted when Philip Davis again appeared at the schoolhouse after classes. "Miss Simmons, I understand your former husband has returned to Copper Creek," he began without preamble. "Yes, Mr. Davis, though I fail to see how that concerns the school." Davis cleared his throat. There's been some discussion among council members. Thomas Simmons was well respected in this community before his departure. His return creates a delicate situation. Clara's patience snapped. A delicate situation. The man abandoned me, Mr. Davis. Now he's returned and demands I sell him the homestead he gave me in our divorce. There's nothing delicate about it. Nevertheless, Davis continued, your position requires you to maintain certain standards. Your association with Mr. Cain was already causing comment. Now, with Thomas's return, there's concern about potential conflicts. Clara stood, gathering her papers with deliberate calm. Mr. Davis, let me be perfectly clear. My personal life is my own business. If the council wishes to dismiss me over unfounded gossip, they may do so. But I will not be intimidated into selling my property or ending my friendship with Mr. Cain. Davis blinked, clearly unused to such directness from a woman. No one is suggesting intimidation, Miss Simmons. We're simply concerned about the school's reputation. The children are learning, Mr. Davis. Their test scores improve weekly. That should be your only concern regarding my abilities as a teacher. Clara walked to the door and held it open. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have preparations for tomorrow's lessons. After Davis left, Clara leaned against the closed door, her heart pounding. She had just risked her livelihood, but the alternative, bowing to the council's veiled threats, was unthinkable. That evening, Clara was not entirely surprised to find Thomas waiting on her porch when she returned to the homestead. What do you want, Thomas? She asked wearily, not bothering with pleasantries. To talk sense into you. He stood, blocking her path to the door. I've spoken with several business owners in town. They agree the land would be better utilized in my hands. Is that why you sent Davis to threaten my position? Clara demanded. Thomas had the grace to look slightly abashed. I merely pointed out that your behavior might reflect poorly on the school. My behavior? You abandoned me, Thomas. You stole our savings. And now you have the audacity to question my behavior. Clara pushed past him to unlock her door. Leave my property. Thomas caught her arm. Clara, be reasonable. This place is falling apart. You can't maintain it alone. Remove your hand, she said quietly, or I will remove it for you. Something in her tone made Thomas release her. This cowboy you've taken up with Cain, what has he promised you? Marriage, protection. Men will say anything to Kieran has promised me nothing except friendship and respect, Clara interrupted. Two things you never managed to provide. Now leave, Thomas, before I fetch my rifle. Thomas's face darkened. This isn't over, Clara. That land should be mine. It's not yours, it's mine, and it will remain mine. Clara entered her cabin and closed the door firmly in his face. That night, Clara slept with her father's old rifle beside her bed, though she doubted Thomas would return. His preferred methods were manipulation and social pressure, not direct confrontation. The following Saturday, Clara told Kieran about Thomas's visit and Davis's thinly veiled threats. He's trying to pressure me through the town council, she concluded. If I lose my teaching position, he knows I'll struggle to keep the homestead. Kieran's expression was grim. Thomas has friends in town, but so do you. The children's parents appreciate your teaching. And Barton has influence with the council. I can speak with him. I don't want to fight Thomas through proxies and politics, Clara sighed, but I won't surrender my home either. You won't have to. Kieran hesitated, then continued carefully. Clara, there's another option we haven't discussed. One that would silence the gossips and strengthen your position legally. Clara's heart raced. Kieran, if you're suggesting marriage, I am, he admitted. Though not how I plan to propose. He took her hands in his. I love you, Clara. I think you know that. I'd hoped to court you properly, give you time to be certain of your feelings, but circumstances being what they are, You want to marry me to protect me from Thomas. Clara pulled her hands away. I won't be married for convenience again, Kieran, not even to you. That's not what I'm offering. His voice was gentle but firm. I'm offering marriage because I love you and want a life with you. The timing is simply accelerated by current events. Clara studied his face, searching for any hint of deception or pity. She found only sincerity and the same steady warmth that had gradually healed her broken trust. I need time to think, she finally said. Kieran nodded. Of course. This is your decision, Clara. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. As March arrived, bringing the first hints of spring, Thomas intensified his campaign to acquire the homestead. He offered increasingly larger sums, enlisted mutual acquaintances to speak on his behalf, and continued to undermine Clara's position in town with subtle suggestions about her relationship with Kieran. Clara stood firm, though the pressure wore on her. The uncertainty regarding her teaching position added financial strain, as some parents, influenced by Thomas's insinuations, began questioning her suitability. Through it all, Kieran remained steadfast. He never mentioned marriage again, respecting her need for space, but his support never wavered. He continued helping at the homestead and spoke on her behalf to influential townspeople, including his employer, James Barton. One evening in mid-March, Clara was marking student papers when a knock came at her door. Opening it cautiously, she found Amelia Watson, now Amelia Simmons, standing on her porch. Mrs. Simmons, Clara said coldly, this is unexpected. Amelia looked uncomfortable, her delicate beauty somewhat diminished by stress. May I come in, please? I need to speak with you. Reluctantly, Clara stepped aside. Amelia entered, glancing around the simple cabin with what seemed like genuine curiosity. What do you want? Clara asked, remaining standing. To apologize, Amelia said quietly. And to warn you, Thomas. He's not the man I thought he was. Clara laughed without humor. I could have told you that before you married him. Yes, well, Amelia twisted her gloved hands. I was young and foolish. Thomas promised me luxury and adventure in Phoenix. Instead, he gambled away most of our money and... She hesitated. He can be cruel when things don't go his way. Why are you telling me this? Because he's determined to get this property, and he doesn't care how. Amelia's voice dropped. He's found some legal documents, something about the original land grant having restrictions about female ownership without a male relative as co-signer. He plans to contest your ownership in court. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. That's absurd. The divorce settlement clearly grants me full ownership. Perhaps, but legal battles are expensive and time-consuming. Thomas believes he can force you to sell rather than fight. Amelia looked around nervously. I shouldn't be here if he knew I'd warned you. Why would you help me? Clara asked, suspicious. Because I know what it's like to have Thomas Simmons steal your choices. Amelia moved toward the door. Find a lawyer, Clara, quickly. After Amelia left, Clara sat at her table, mind racing. If Thomas had indeed found some legal technicality, she could lose everything. The homestead, her independence, all of it rested on her clear ownership of the property. The next day, Clara visited the only lawyer in Copper Creek, Milton Jenkins. The elderly attorney listened to her concerns, then spent an hour reviewing her divorce documents and the original land grant. There is a clause, he finally admitted, common in territorial grants from that period. It requires female landowners to have a male co-signer husband, brother, or father to validate certain transactions. But the land is mine, Clara insisted. Thomas gave it to me in the divorce. Yes, and that transfer is legal, but there could be complications if Thomas challenges it based on this clause. Jenkins sighed. It's an outdated regulation, rarely enforced nowadays, but technically still valid. What can I do? Clara asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Jenkins hesitated. The simplest solution would be to have a male relative co-sign the ownership documents. Do you have a father or brother nearby? My father is dead and my brother lives in Ohio. Clara shook her head. There must be another way. Well, Jenkins looked uncomfortable. Marriage would resolve the issue immediately. A husband's signature would satisfy the requirement. Clara left the lawyer's office with a heavy heart. The solution seemed obvious: marry Kieran, secure her legal position, and build the life they both wanted. Yet something held her back. Pride, perhaps, or lingering fear. The idea that her hand might be forced into marriage again, even to a man she loved, rankled deeply. That evening, Clara sat on her porch watching the sunset, turning over her options. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted her thoughts. Looking up, she expected to see Kieran, but instead found Thomas riding toward the homestead. Clara stood, bracing herself for another confrontation. But as Thomas drew closer, she noticed something different in his demeanor, a dangerous confidence that sent alarm racing through her. "Clara," he called, dismounting smoothly. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" "What do you want, Thomas?" He smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "I've just come from Jenkins's office. Interesting conversation about land ownership requirements in the territory." "Amelia warned me," Clara said flatly. "Your legal maneuvering won't work." Thomas's smile faltered slightly. "Amelia spoke to you. How unexpected," he recovered quickly. "Nevertheless, the law is clear. This property requires a male co-signer for you to maintain ownership. Unless you're planning to marry your cowboy very soon, I suggest you reconsider my offer." "I'd rather burn this place to the ground than sell it to you," Clara replied evenly. Thomas's facade of civility slipped. "Don't be dramatic, Clara. You're fighting a losing battle. Even if you marry Cain, I can tie the property up in legal challenges for years. Do you think a saddle tramp like him has money for lawyers?" "Don't call him that," Clara said sharply. "Hit a nerve, did I?" Thomas smirked. "What does Cain want with this worthless plot anyway? Unless it's not the land he's after." Clara's patience snapped. "Get off my property, Thomas, now. It won't be your property much longer," he warned, remounting his horse. "1 week, Clara, then I file my challenge." After Thomas left, Clara paced the cabin, anger and frustration boiling inside her. The unfairness of it all, that her claim to the land she'd worked so hard to improve could be threatened by an outdated law, was infuriating. By morning, Clara had made her decision. After school, she rode to the Murphy property west of town where Kieran had been working whenever he wasn't helping her, or at the Barton Ranch. She found him repairing the roof of the small house, much as he had first helped her months ago. He climbed down when he saw her approach, his face lighting with pleasure, then shifting to concern as he read her expression. "Clara, what's wrong?" Without preamble, she explained Thomas's legal threat and Jenkins's assessment of her vulnerable position. Kieran listened silently, his expression darkening. "So you see," Clara concluded, "I need to make a decision quickly." "Clara," Kieran began carefully, "if you're here to accept my proposal, I want to be certain it's because you want to marry me, not because Thomas is forcing your hand." "That's just it," she replied, frustration evident in her voice. "I do want to marry you, Kieran. I love you, but I hate that Thomas's manipulation is pushing me to decide now this way." Kieran's face softened at her declaration. "You love me," Clara laughed despite herself. "Of all that I just said, that's what you focus on. It seems the most important part." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Clara, I've loved you since that first day you stood in the street, refusing to let Thomas's betrayal break you. I'll marry you tomorrow if that's what you want." but I'll also help you fight Thomas through other means if you're not ready." Clara looked up at him, this man who had never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel less than his equal. "I am ready," she realized aloud. "Not because of Thomas or legal necessity, but because I want a life with you. I just wish the timing were our choice, not his." Kieran considered this, then his eyes lit with an idea. "Perhaps we can take back the choice." He squeezed her hands. "Do you trust me?" "Yes," Clara answered without hesitation. "Then give me 2 days. Don't answer Thomas, don't make any decisions. Just wait." 2 days later, Kieran arrived at the schoolhouse after classes. "Can you come with me?" he asked, an unusual excitement in his manner. "There's something I need to show you." Curious, Clara followed him to the Murphy property. As they crested the final hill, she gasped. A group of men, at least a dozen, were working on the small house and surrounding land. Some repaired the porch, others cleared fields, and still others constructed what appeared to be new outbuildings. "What is this?" Clara asked, amazed. "Friends," Kieran answered simply. "Barton and his hands, the blacksmith, Jenkins, even Reverend Miller. Men who respect you and don't appreciate Thomas's tactics." Clara recognized many faces, parents of her students, shopkeepers, ranchers, men who had watched her rebuild her life with determination and dignity. "They're helping us establish our home," Kieran continued. "If you still want to marry me. No rush, no pressure from Thomas, but when we do marry, we'll have this place ready." "And the homestead?" Clara asked. "Yours, legally protected by our marriage when you decide the time is right. But this," he gestured to the property around them, "this is ours. Our fresh start when you're ready." Tears filled Clara's eyes as the magnitude of his gesture sank in. Kieran had found a way to preserve her independence while offering partnership. The choice remained hers, but he had removed Thomas's power to force her hand. "How did you manage this?" she whispered. Kieran smiled. "Turns out I'm not the only one who thinks Thomas gave up gold for dust when he left you. These men respect what you've built on your own. They're just making sure Thomas doesn't steal it." Clara turned to Kieran, her heart full. "Ask me again," she said softly. Understanding immediately, Kieran took her hands. This time he knelt before her, in full view of the working men who discreetly paused their tasks. "Clara Simmons, I love you, your strength, your determination, your kind heart. Will you marry me, build a life with me, be my partner in all things? Not because you need my protection, but because we're better together than apart." "Yes," Clara answered, joy replacing all uncertainty. "Yes, I will marry you, Kieran Kane." Cheers erupted from the men watching, and Kieran stood to sweep Clara into an embrace. As he kissed her, their first real kiss, Clara felt the last protective walls around her heart dissolve completely. They were married 3 days later in the small church in Copper Creek. The ceremony was simple, but well attended. Clara wore a new blue dress purchased with her teaching salary, and Kieran looked handsome in a crisp white shirt and black suit borrowed from James Barton. Thomas, upon hearing of their engagement, had made one final attempt to intimidate Clara, visiting the homestead the evening before the wedding. "This changes nothing," he had insisted. "I can still challenge the property transfer." "You can try," Clara had replied calmly. "But Jenkins has already filed updated ownership documents with my soon-to-be husband's signature. And he's prepared to defend our claim all the way to the territorial court, if necessary." Thomas had stormed away, defeated by Clara's confidence, and the community support rallied behind her and Kieran. After the wedding, the newlyweds faced a decision whether to live at the homestead or the Murphy property. In the end, they chose both, at least temporarily. Weekdays were spent at the homestead, closer to town for Clara's teaching, while weekends were devoted to developing their new property. By summer, Clara's small field yielded its first vegetable crop, vindicating her faith in the difficult land. Kieran's experienced management brought further improvements: a better irrigation system, strategic planting to maximize the limited water, and careful crop selection suited to the arid soil. In July, news reached them that Thomas and Amelia had left Copper Creek, reportedly headed for California. Clara felt only relief, her anger long since replaced by appreciation for the unexpected path Thomas's betrayal had ultimately led her down. One evening in late August, Clara and Kieran sat on the porch of their new home on the Murphy property, now nearly complete. The house was larger than Clara's cabin, with 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, and wide porches designed to catch the evening breeze. "I've been thinking," Clara said, leaning against Kieran's shoulder, "about the homestead." "What about it?" Kieran asked, his arm comfortable around her waist. "Maybe we should sell it after all, not to Thomas, obviously, but to someone who could use a fresh start." Kieran looked surprised. "Are you sure? You fought so hard to keep it." Clara nodded. "That land taught me I could stand on my own, rebuild after loss. But this," she gestured to their new home and the fertile fields beyond, "this is where our future lies, together." "Together," Kieran agreed, kissing her softly. "Although I'm keeping Daisy, that cow is family now." Clara laughed, happiness bubbling up inside her. "Speaking of family." She took Kieran's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "We might need those extra bedrooms sooner than we thought." Kieran's expression transformed from confusion to wonder. "Clara, are you saying?" "Yes." Her smile was radiant. "Come February, there will be 3 of us." Kieran whooped with joy, lifting Clara from her chair and spinning her around. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I love you, Clara Cain." "And I love you," she replied, marveling at how completely her life had changed in just 1 year. From abandoned wife to beloved partner and soon-to-be mother. In October, they sold the homestead to a young widow with 2 children who had arrived in Copper Creek, seeking a new beginning. Clara showed her the improvements they'd made: the water catchment system, the small but productive vegetable plot. "It's not easy land," Clara told her honestly, "but with determination, it will provide." The woman, Sarah Jenkins, no relation to the lawyer, had nodded gratefully. "Thank you for giving me this chance. Not many would sell to a woman alone." "You're not alone," Clara had replied. "You're part of this community now, and if you need help, you only have to ask." By Christmas, Clara and Kieran were fully settled in their new home. The property now boasted a small herd of cattle, Kieran's pride and joy, along with chickens, 2 milk cows, including the faithful Daisy, and plans for expanding the orchard in spring. Clara continued teaching, though she planned to take time off after the baby's birth. The town council, far from objecting to her marriage, had been relieved by the resolution of the delicate situation, and had even approved a small raise for the coming year. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire in their new home, Kieran presented Clara with a small wooden cradle he had crafted himself. "For our little one," he said, running his hand over the smooth wood. "First of many, I hope." "Many," Clara raised an eyebrow, though her smile was teasing. "Let's see how we manage one before planning a brood." Kieran laughed, pulling her close. "Fair enough. Though I should warn you, Cains tend to have large families. My mother was one of 8. 8, Clara's eyes widened in mock horror. "Perhaps we should have built a bigger house." "We can always expand," he replied, his hand gentle on her growing belly. "This land has plenty of room for growth." As the new year of 1884 began, Clara often reflected on the strange path that had led her to this happiness. Thomas's betrayal, which had once seemed like the end of her world, had ultimately opened the door to a deeper, truer love than she had ever imagined possible. In February, Their daughter Catherine Rose Cain was born healthy, strong-lunged, and with her father's sky-blue eyes. As Clara held her newborn child, Kieran seated beside them on the bed, she felt a completeness she had never known before. "She's perfect," Kieran whispered, one finger caught in his daughter's tiny grip. "She is," Clara agreed. "Our little gold nugget." Kieran smiled at the reference. "Thomas really did give up gold for dust, didn't he?" "His loss," Clara said softly. "Our gain." By spring, Clara had returned to teaching part-time, bringing Catherine with her to the schoolhouse. The arrangement worked well, with older students delighting in helping care for the baby during lessons. The Cain property flourished under their combined efforts. Kieran's cattle business grew steadily, while Clara's careful management of the household and gardens ensured they were largely self-sufficient. The orchard bloomed for the first time that April, promising fruit by summer's end. In town, they were respected as hardworking, fair-minded members of the community. Kieran joined the town council that fall, using his position to advocate for fair water rights and support for smaller ranchers. Clara's teaching continued to earn praise, with several families moving to Copper Creek, specifically for the quality of education she provided. On their first wedding anniversary, Kieran took Clara on a picnic to the spot where he had proposed. The Murphy property, now simply the Cain Ranch, had transformed in a year. Green pastures stretched toward the horizon, the house stood white and welcoming against the blue sky, and the once struggling orchard now showed promise of abundant harvests to come. "I have something for you," Kieran said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet pouch and placed it in Clara's hand. Inside, she found a gold locket. Opening it revealed a tiny portrait of Catherine on one side and a lock of the baby's dark hair on the other. "It's beautiful," Clara whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "Not as beautiful as you," Kieran replied, helping her fasten it around her neck. "Or as precious as what you've given me: a family, a home, a purpose." Clara touched the locket, then reached for her husband's hand. "We built this together, Kieran. Equal partners, just as you promised." As the sun began to set, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Clara and Kieran walked hand in hand back toward their home, where Mrs. Wilson from town was watching baby Catherine. "Do you ever wonder," Clara asked suddenly, "what would have happened if Thomas hadn't left me? If we had never met?" Kieran considered the question seriously. "I believe we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be." Clara smiled at his certainty. "Perhaps you're right. Though I'm glad we didn't have to test that theory." "As am I." Kieran stopped, turning to face her fully. "Clara Kane, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Every day I thank whatever twist of fate brought us together. Even when I'm being stubborn," she teased. "Especially then," he answered, echoing his words from long ago. "Your strength is one of the countless reasons I love you." As they reached their home, the soft glow of lamps welcoming them inside, Clara felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. From abandoned wife to beloved partner, from uncertainty to confidence, from loneliness to family, each step, even the painful ones, had been necessary. Thomas Simmons had indeed given up gold for dust. But in doing so, he had unknowingly given Clara the greatest gift of all: the chance to find true partnership with a man who valued her exactly as she was, who saw her independence not as a threat, but as a strength to be cherished. And that, Clara thought as Kieran swung their daughter into his arms, was a treasure beyond price.